Alright, number 10, Thor goes fishing. Jormungand was yet another one of Loki's creative offsprings, born to be the destroyer of Thor during Ragnarok. In order to prevent this, they threw the great beastly serpent into the water, and it was supposed to like to hold the world together until Ragnarok. But Thor was a little scoundrel and didn't mind risking it all. Aegir and Ran, two lovely, hospitable giants, as I heard, agreed to host the gods for an immaculate feast. But when Thor arrived, he consumed 2 of the 3 cows that they had brought for the feast. They were like, Thor, dude, that was supposed to be for everybody. So they're like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to go fishing the next day. Then Thor slaughtered one of their biggest bulls to use for bait, which also sucked, but that was gonna be okay, he was gonna be strong for fishing. Anyways, they get out into the waves, and while the one giant gets 2 whales, Thor heads out further with a bigger game on his mind. Jormungand was, after all, beneath the waves. He cast his line out, and sure enough, he got a massive bite. The force was so immense that it pulled his feet through the boat, and the serpent's head was like coming up through the boat, about to bite him. Thor had his hammer ready to slay the beast, his mortal enemy, but then the giant cut the line because he got scared and the serpent slithered back into the water. Then Thor was so mad, he threw him overboard. Literally, the worst guest to have at a party. Eats all your cows, almost causes Ragnarok, and then throws you into the ocean with a giant serpent at the bottom.
Alright, at number 9, good laugh. We all love a good laugh, right? Well, apparently a good laugh is what saved the Norse gods from facing vengeance from the giantess Skadi. You see, the gods killed Skadi's father and she demanded vengeance, but after a lot of negotiating with her, they were able to talk her out of that and instead offered her 3 things as reparations. The first was a husband of her choosing, however she could only choose him by his feet for some reason, don't ask me why. The second was having her father's eyes memorialized in the stars, and the third was just a good old laugh. Out of Skadi's 3 reparations, the hardest task was making her laugh. The gods tried everything to get a giggle out of the giantess, but nothing seemed to work. That's when Loki, the trickster god, came through and was basically like, step aside boys, let me handle this. And he sure did handle things. Loki then brought in a goat, tied a rope to it, and tied the other end to his nads, and proceeded to play tug of war with the goat. Like that. Both Loki and the goat screamed out in pain, as you could imagine, and Loki collapsed. And that is what made Skadi laugh.
Number 8, a little bit of incest. Why not? Can we even do a list about mythology without mentioning incest? No, not probable. Why? Because, I don't know, the gods loved it. And people needed to populate the earth back then, so it wasn't too far-fetched of an idea. Anyway, even though Norse mythology doesn't love the idea of incest, doesn't mean it didn't happen. The goddess Signy fell into a pretty crummy marriage, and so to solve her situation, incest. She was married to Aegir and didn't like him because 1, not a nice guy, and 2, not manly enough for her. He also was a terrible husband. He killed her father and all of her siblings, except for 1. Not cool, man. But the one that did survive, they teamed up to overthrow her hubby. Her 2 sons joined in, but they weren't ruthless killers and completely failed at all the times they tried to kill her dad. So she needed to up the ante, and that meant keeping it in the family, so she slept with her brother for 3 nights in order to spawn the force that would rid her of her husband. This son, when it came to fruition, knew what it was up and eventually assassinated her husband. Does this remind anyone of like a certain god origin story in Greek mythology? Let me know in the comments if you're thinking what I'm thinking. Number 7, Nishi Dak. Have you ever turned around at your desk thinking someone just called your name? Or could you have sworn you heard someone say your name walking home alone at night in the dark? This has definitely happened to me, and it certainly makes me wonder whether there is a supernatural reason. Otherwise, why does almost every culture have a myth related to voices in the dark? The Nishi Dak from Hindu mythology is a dark entity that lures travelers deep into the forest areas by making it sound like a loved one is calling to them. This is the moment where curiosity could kill the cat, because if it got the better of you, you could end up dead. The voices will lead you to a deserted area away from prying eyes, and then snap, it will devour you. But what if it's actually someone I know who needs help? Well, there is one way to tell. Wait for them to call a 3rd time. The Nishi Dak can only say your name twice, so if it no longer says it again, keep moving, as it is surely the Nishi Dak. Number 6, Nail Ba. Part of the role that mythology plays is to establish rules and boundaries for society, especially children. If you don't want a young one playing by the river alone, you tell them a scary story about a monster who lives there, so they won't go near it. But did they really have to go this hard with this one? Damn! Nailbot is a terrifying, dark, demonic spirit that walks the streets visiting people's houses. Her name has been written on the doors and walls of small towns and villages in rural Bangalore to deter the spirit from entering. Some variations of the myth say that she is the spirit of a wandering bride seeking her husband. If you open the door to receive her, she will take the man of the house and bring bad luck to the household. Another version says, which is kind of where it gets confusing, says that should you open the door in the first place, you will be cursed to die within 24 hours. Apparently she speaks in the voices of your friends and family in order to appear more trustworthy. Villagers write her name on the door to ward her off, as they should. Number 5. Boba. I love all the legends that circulate sleep paralysis. If you have ever experienced it, you know how terrifying it can be. We know that it is a global phenomenon as most cultures around the world have lore surrounding it. The one that belongs to Indian mythology is the boba. When people experience sleep paralysis, symptoms often include seeing shadowy figures, you're unable to move, there is pressure on your chest, pretty much having a nightmare while you're awake. The boba is said to be a horrific creature who causes it. Made of shadows, the boba's entity preys on those who sleep on their back. Very specific. So no side sleepers here. It strangles its victims to death while asleep, and it is said to be a paranormal explanation for sleep paralysis. So side sleepers, like me, you're safe. If you sleep on your back, you're in trouble. Number 4. Hiranyakshipu. Is it better to be feared or respected? Respected, obviously, that's what I think, because hopefully no one will be looking to stab you in the back if they're so afraid of you, you know what I mean? So it was only a matter of time for the self-proclaimed king of demons, his words, not anyone else's. Even his own son was like, nah dad. Even though he wasn't the one who did it, he wanted everyone to believe that he created the universe and that he was uncontrollable. His son was, of course, one of the ones who refused to take his belief. Not a good look for him, so he of course tried to kill his own son. No love when you're the king of demons apparently, but every time he tried to even harm his son, he walked out of it unscathed. The reason? Vishnu was protecting him the entire time. But how would they get rid of his father? Well, because he could not be killed by a human, deva, or animal, Vishnu created a blend of creatures creating something entirely different. It was called Narasimha, and one day at twilight he laid on the king of demons' lap and disemboweled him with his claws. I feel like the king of demons was like, oh look, a kitty thing, oh no, and then died.
At number 3, target practice. We all know about Odin's son Thor. He is the most famous child of the Norse Allfather, but you might not know about Odin's other son, Balder. Balder was known for being well liked by everyone. Well, maybe not everyone. Loki was the one person who didn't like Balder, and he ended up being Balder's undoing. One night, Balder started having nightmares where he pictured his own death. This had his mom really worried, and so, as any mother would do, she sought out to protect her child at all costs. She went to everyone and everything in existence, including inanimate objects, and she asked them to take an oath promising to never hurt Balder. These oaths were no joke, and as everyone agreed to take this oath, this essentially made Balder invincible. The gods found this so great, so they made a game where they would use Balder as target practice and would throw weapons and other miscellaneous items at him, only for all of them to just bounce right off of him. This was all fun and games until Loki got fed up with Balder being the center of attention. Loki ended up finding the one thing that Balder's mother did not get an oath from, and that was mistletoe. Loki then made a spear out of mistletoe, and the next time the gods played their game with Balder, Loki gave the spear to someone who threw it at Balder, and then he died.
Number 2, a naughty little squirrel. Everyone has that friend that loves the drama so much that most of the time they are the drama. And of course, everyone has had squirrels ruin their gardens or outdoor wiring at some point. How on earth do these two things relate? Well, let me introduce you to Ratatosk. In Norse mythology, all creatures live on the Tree of Life, which includes a little squirrel who loves to cause the drama. Specifically between a dragon and an eagle who live on the tree. Ratatosk's job is to ferry messages throughout the tree, and quite often the dragon and the eagle love to insult each other. The squirrel loves it so much that he will even lie to keep it going, but it doesn't stop there. He will even spread gossip and unrelated news to the other gods. The squirrel will do anything to keep the hatred flowing throughout the tree, which somehow explains how rude squirrels are most of the time. Like, honestly, what the heck. Except one time, one came up on my shoulder and like just hung out, and it was really nice. So they're not all bad.
Finally, at number 1, Thor the Bride. If you know anything about Thor, it's that he loves his hammer Mjolnir more than anything, and if he loses it, he would move heaven and earth to get that sucker back. Well, Thor's hammer was once stolen by a giant named Thrym, and Thor and Loki came up with an insane plan to get it back. Thor tried to negotiate with the giant to give him back his hammer, but the giant said that the only way he would return Mjolnir to Thor was if he could marry Freya. That was certainly not going to happen, at least not for real. Thor decided to impersonate Freya instead and marry the giant, and when Loki caught wind of this plan, he decided to join. Loki disguised himself as a handmaiden in order to watch this whole thing unfold. The giants ended up buying Thor and Loki's disguises, and they made it to the wedding feast. The giants were getting a little suspicious because he seemed manly, and especially when it came to his appetite, but that didn't matter in the long run because the moment that Thor was able to get his hands on Mjolnir, he not only left the giant at the altar, but he killed the giant and all of the wedding guests too. Sounds like the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, honestly.
Number 10, Pasiphae and the Bull. The gods, man, they love to throw some bestiality as punishment at their will and pleasure. Equus probably would have been their favorite Broadway show. Everyone knows the story of the Minotaur, but do you know how it all got started? Well, let me enlighten you. King Minos begged the god Poseidon to send him a glorious white bull that he could sacrifice. The god obliged. He sent him the most beautiful, stunning creature from out of the sea, because apparently bulls come out of the sea. Anyways, but when King Minos went to sacrifice the creature, he found he could not bring himself to kill such a noble beast, so he just killed another bull instead. Outraged by his disobedience, Poseidon punished him by making his wife Pasiphae fall into uncontrollable lust with the bull. She convinced an Athenian inventor to create a hollow wooden bull for her to hide in, kind of like a Trojan horse, that could facilitate a union. Yeah. Like a union. You get what I mean by that, yeah. She then later gave birth to the one, the only, the Minotaur, which would later plague King Minos and all that fun stuff. You know, like the whole labyrinth thing, yeah. That story. Weird. Don't understand it. But here it is. Number 9, Arachne. You'd think if someone was really good at something, they should be rewarded. But no, oh no, that's not how the ancient gods worked. Their egos were very fragile. Sorry, okay, chill out. Anyways, Arachne was a girl who was an incredibly talented seamstress, which made her a little bit cocky. One day she was so proud of her work that she proclaimed that she was a better weaver than Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and war, so not a good person to mess with. Athena warned her not to make such claims, but she ignored her, so the two faced off. The two had a weaving contest in which Arachne ended up winning in front of all of the onlookers, but Athena didn't accept defeat gracefully and, instead of rewarding her, punished Arachne to feel immense overwhelming guilt, causing her to take her own life. But that wasn't enough for Athena. The goddess brought her back as a giant spider who would forever weave her designs in the forms of webs. Not very nice. Not very nice indeed. Number 8, Erysichthon. Are rich people rich because they're greedy, or greedy because they're rich? Either way, Erysichthon was, bottom line, a very greedy man with wealth that spilled over. Kinda like the Sun King, really. Planning to build another feast hall for himself because he needed another one, he demanded that a massive grove of trees be cut down to make room. This grove, however, was sacred to Demeter, the goddess of earth, but the men did as he asked, save for one tree. One tree was left standing, covered in beautiful wreaths, symbolizing every prayer she'd ever granted. When the men wouldn't do it, Erysichthon tried to do it himself. While doing so, he killed the dryad who lived in the tree, which really didn't bode well with the goddess. To suit his greed, she set down Lemos, the divine representation of starvation. Overwhelmed by a formidable hunger, the more he ate, the more he desired. He sold off his entire fortune, including his own daughter, to buy more and more food, but nothing would slake his hunger. Finally, he began eating himself, bit by bit, until he finally perished in his own greed, destitute and alone. So, moral of the story is don't cut down trees. Or don't be greedy and don't cut down trees.
At number 7, Loki the Mare. When it comes to gods sleeping around with everyone and everything, Loki gives Zeus a serious run for his money. There are tons of stories about Loki hooking up with gods, people, and just about every other living thing. One of the weirdest stories about Loki's escapades is how he once had a night in the woods with a horse. Basically, the story here is that there was a horse that he really liked, a stallion named Svaldafari. Svaldafari was a horse who belonged to a mason worker who just so happened to be a giant. This giant really didn't like the gods and wanted them to just go away, and so Loki offered to help by distracting the giant's horse. Not really seeing how that's actually helping, but go off, I guess. Loki transformed himself into a mare, and then he and Svaldafari went off into the woods to mate. Horse Loki ended up getting pregnant and gave birth to an 8-legged steed named Sleipnir. Sleipnir then became Odin's steed, and this monster horse was actually featured in the Thor movie, so next time you watch it, keep an eye out for Loki's weird monster horse child.
Number 6, giant cloud brains. I do love gazing up at the clouds, making up stories like, that's a dragon, that's a chariot, that's a bumblebee. No one knew thousands of years ago that clouds are just dense collections of water vapor floating through the atmosphere, so when they saw things in the cloud, they thought they were real. So in a way, it kind of makes sense. According to Norse mythology, the world was made up from human severed body parts, specifically of the giant Ymir. His blood turned into the oceans, his flesh became the land, his bones the mountains, his teeth the rocks, his hair plants, and his eyelashes became Midgard. So as much sense as that makes, the clouds were his brains. His skull was tossed up into the sky, held up by dwarves, they're still up there. His brain was tossed separately, and that made the clouds.
At number 5, mead and poetry. There are many creation stories for Norse gods that are pretty weird. The gods were created from all kinds of things and it's a little complex, but one of the weirder creation stories is that of the god Kvasir, known to be the wisest of them all. The story goes that the gods just won a war and they were looking to celebrate their victory with a special drink. They all chewed berries and spat them out to ferment them and create alcohol. However, instead of making a drink, they made a person, and that person was Kvasir. His name literally translates to fermented berry juice, so it really doesn't get more straightforward than that. This new god became the smartest god to have ever existed. He was known to share his wisdom with anyone who would listen and traveled far and wide to share his knowledge. Sadly though, he was too wise for everyone and Kvasir was killed by dwarves and they drained his blood. They then used this blood to create a special kind of mead that granted poetic skills to those who drank it. It is believed that this drink was the birth of poetry, so Kvasir's death ended up creating something beautiful after all.
Number 4, kitten footsteps. If you have a dog that's a little tempestuous and keeps breaking out of their collar, then listen up. We've been doing it all wrong. The strongest collar is one that's embedded with the sound of cat footsteps, such as the one used to keep Fenrir at bay. Fenrir was a colossal wolf offspring of the god Loki because again, he was super creative when it came to having kids. The gods were so afraid of him that out of the 3 monsters Loki had, this one they kept under lock and key. They reared him up as a pup and the only god fearless enough to approach him was Tyr, the upholder of law and order. As it grew, they kept putting chains on the beast, clapping every time Fenrir broke through them to disguise their intent as a test of strength. But soon they sought out the dwarves, because they were awesome, for their skill. They forged a chain of unequivocal strength. Instead of metal, it was made from the sound of cats' footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of mountains, the breath of fish, and the spittle of bird. All things that don't exist. When they showed Fenrir, he suspected something was up because it was so light, so he asked for a god to put their hand in his mouth as collateral. Tyr did so, knowing that he would lose his hand because it was gonna work. He did, and Fenrir, unable to break it, was transported to an isolated keep, and there he stayed until Ragnarok, because he's gonna kill Odin. Number 3, Alcyon and Ceyx. This one kinda hurts my heart, I mean, honest. The love story between these two is just something everyone longs for. They were admired by humans and the gods, and yet they were still punished for it. What? Alcyon was the daughter of the god of wind and devoted wife to King Ceyx of Trachis. They were so in love with each other, they often playfully called each other Zeus and Hera. Despite many of the gods admiring them, and this was clearly an endearment, Zeus wasn't pleased. How dare they compare themselves to the gods? So he waited until Ceyx planned to visit the oracle, against his wife's wishes, who was concerned the wind he faced would be too harsh on the sea. Even her father had difficulty controlling it. But he did, and Zeus stirred a storm that sunk the ship. With his last breath, Ceyx prayed his body would be brought back to his wife. Hera took pity on the mournful widow and sent a messenger and the body back to her. After burying her husband, she flung herself into the sea to be reunited with him. The gods were horrified by Zeus's actions because they loved the two of them, so he tried to atone for his rash action by transforming them into kingfisher birds. Yeah, Zeus, turning them into birds, it really fixes everything, don't? You're fine. Number 2, Pan. What a weirdo! Pan is literally the weirdest horn dog god who ever graced the planet Earth. Firstly, the way this dude came to be makes no sense. There are many versions, but one of them involves Odysseus' lonely wife getting jiggy with 108 suitors. Pan, like, stamina, right? Pan had the hind legs and horn of a goat and was the god of shepherds, flocks, hunters, forests, pastoral music, and fertility, the last one being the most prominent. Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye would have been this guy's anthem. He pursued everything and everyone, nymphs being his favorite. They would be so desperate to get away from him they'd have to turn into trees, Mira, reeds. Echo was even killed by his minions when she denied him. He could also multiply himself, creating like a swarm of Pan. He's also the only god who ever died, but no one is quite sure how that happened, so again, another confusing thing about him. Number 1, last but not least, Thyestes and Atreus. This next one will have your brain scrambled by the end. Thyestes and Atreus were brothers constantly at odds. While their father, the king of Mycenae, was away at war, they seized the city and Atreus became king. He sacrificed a lamb with a golden fleece to seal the deal with Artemis and gave the fleece to his wife, who was fooling around with his brother Thyestes, and she gave the fleece to him. Thyestes made his brother swear that whoever had the fleece would be king, and thinking that his wife kept it safe, he agreed. Thyestes then showed the fleece. Atreus, pissed off, asked the gods for help. Hermes told him to tell Thyestes to promise that he would be made king again if the sun went backwards in the sky. Thyestes agreed, thinking it was impossible, so Zeus made it happen. Then Atreus fed Thyestes his own sons for dinner unknowingly and banished him as punishment. Then an oracle told Thyestes that in order to exact revenge, his own daughter had to have his son. So he made that happen in the grossest way possible. And then, it sounds like I'm talking about some dramatic housewife show. And then the son grew up, killed Atreus, and Thyestes became king. But wait, Atreus' sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, came back, overthrew him, and Agamemnon finally became king, ending the whole cycle. We're good. Alright, I'm tired after that one. Number 10, the dedication of Eclavia. You know what you shouldn't do as a teacher? Make a student who is really talented self-sabotage themselves so they don't beat out another kid, which is exactly what happened to Eclavia. Eclavia was a very talented young boy who lived deep in the forest among his tribe. He wanted to become the best archer in the world, and he was very well on his way to becoming it. However, when he asked to become a student of the great Drona, he was denied due to his poor social standing. But Eclavia was not deterred. He built a statue of his idol instead and let it inspire him as he practiced archery every day. He became so skilled that when Drona learned of this, he was afraid he would surpass his best student, Arjuna. So he demanded Eclavia payment for studying under him, even though it wasn't technically under him, in the form of his right thumb. Then, sadly, this story doesn't really have a happy ending. The boy cut off his thumb right there and then, forfeiting his dreams of becoming the best in the biz. So overall, work hard to get where you want to, and then give over to jealousy and let someone cut your thumb off so that you'll never achieve it. Number 9, Muhnochwa. Confusing and terrifying? We love a little bit of everything here on Bumblebee, which is why I bring you Muhnochwa. a terrifying creature slash demon that delights in scratching the faces off its victims, a very specific thing, leaving them for dead. No one quite knows what it looks like, but the most common description is a hairy spider with soulless eyes. Spiders already have soulless eyes, I hate them. They are known for attacking only at night and sometimes cause strange blackouts before they attack. Now, many believed for a long time that it was simply the stuff of legend, a scary bedtime story told to make sure children behave. But in the early 2000s, the town of Kanpur, India blamed several attacks on the creature. Several people reported attacks at night and awoke with strange abrasions on their faces. Even more mysteriously, the victims entirely blacked out on the events leading up to it. Police as well as civilians became so convinced that it was real and it was attacking their community that they led special searches at night. But then, almost as soon as they had begun, the attacks stopped, leaving behind yet another legend of a bedtime story becoming real. Number 8. The Devotion of Surdas. Genuine question for all of you. If you saw the most beautiful thing, place, person in the world and knew that nothing else would ever be as perfect, would you wish to keep your sight or have your sight taken away because nothing would ever come close to it? Personally, I'd probably keep my sight because you never know. But Surdas was so devoted to Lord Krishna that he had his sight taken away again. He loved Krishna so much that he wrote song after song in his praise. Surdas was a blind man but had a heart for music. One day Surdas fell into a well and Krishna saved him. Radha, his companion, became jealous and against Krishna's orders saying to stay away from him, she went to him anyways. As she passed, Surdas clutched onto her anklets. When he wouldn't let go, she revealed herself, but Surdas couldn't confirm her identity, so he held on. Krishna then graced him with vision and let go of the anklets. He was so stunned at having finally seen his hero that he asked to be blind again as nothing would ever come close to it. My question is, if he was blind since birth, how would he even know what Radha looked like to identify her? Would he just have been overwhelmed by her amazing goddessness? I don't know. Number 7. Leda and the Swan. Like, Zeus, head of the gods, the one we all should be looking up to, was like questionably immoral. But like, I mean, when you're a god, you can kind of do what you want. This story hurts my head because I just, like, how does A get to B? Anyways, Leda was the daughter of the king of Pleuron in Aetolia and wife to Tyndaris. One day she wandered by the river Eurotas and Zeus fell hard for this bathing beauty, but he just couldn't show up in his true form because 1. Hera, his wife and sister, was watching, and 2. She probably would explode if she saw his true form. So he went to Aphrodite to ask what to do and she transformed him into an immaculate swan. By either seduction or nefarious action, there's two sides to the story. Some say her and others say that she was into it, I don't know. Leda became pregnant either way and gave birth to 2 eggs. Eggs! Inside the eggs were 2 sets of twins. One, the infamous Helen of Troy and Polydeuces, and the other 2 were born from Leda's husband, Clytemnestra and Castor. One pair was immortal and the other mortal, which is also still confusing because, like, didn't Helen of Troy die? I don't know. There was also another version which is pretty much the same tale except it was the goddess Nemesis, not Leda, and Zeus turned into a beaver and it was just really weird, so again, confusing. No idea what's going on. Number 6. Kronos. I like how the Greek gods are as like chaotic to how the world is in Greek mythology. It kind of makes a weird sort of sense, you know? This weird godly family was messed up from the very beginning, and if you don't know the original story of Kronos, then, well, here you go. Before the gods of Olympus, before Zeus and Hera, there were the elder gods Gaia and Uranus, and then their son Kronos, who married Rhea. Kronos overthrew his father, and when he heard that one of his children was going to do the same thing, he decided to eat them. All of them. Just gobbled them down like an aspirin. Rhea wasn't a huge fan of the whole thing, and eventually enough was enough. So when Kronos went to swallow Zeus, Rhea tricked him and gave him a rock instead. She stole Zeus and hid him away until the day he would be strong enough to return and overtake his father. Disguised as a cupbearer, he gave his father a purgative which made him puke up all of his siblings. Together they stormed against their father and overthrew him after 10 years in battle. Whew, that's a rough start to family life. And then Zeus married his sister and there was a whole bunch of incest. It's just, you know what I mean. You've heard that. Number 5, the story of Mira. What is she pointing at? Ever been so sad and disheartened that you just wish you could turn into a tree? Yeah, me too. Then people could just leave me alone. However, However, the only person to ever successfully transform into a tree was Mira, who turned into the Myrrh tree. But the story behind it is kind of messed up. Mira loved her father. A little too much. Like way too much. She was in love with her father and desperately wanted to be with him. She knew it was wrong and tried everything to resist the gnawing desire inside of her, even trying to take her own life. Her nurse found her and, fearing ever parting with her, decided to work up a scheme to hitch the two together. On the celebration of Bacchus, the queen hitched town, so the bed was empty. You see where this is going. Disguised as a maid, the nurse brought Mira to his bedchamber for 12 straight nights. On the final night, the king, overwhelmed with curiosity, removed the mask she was wearing. When he discovered that his lover had been his daughter, he reached for his sword and tried to kill her. Makes sense. Mira fled her father and ran across the desert for 9 months, and surprise, she was pregnant. When she couldn't run anymore, she begged the gods to hide her from the world. They took pity on her and turned her into the Myrrh tree, which one day would be hit by a running boar, revealing the child Adonis tucked into the bark. Adonis was also supposed to be super hot and awesome, which totally doesn't play by the rules of like incest. Like usually something goes wrong there. Remember Joffrey? Like that didn't go well. Number 4, Ixion. This one is confusing because it prompts a question I've never wanted to ask. How do you even make love to a cloud? When Ixion, the king of Lapiths and the son of Ares, married Dia, the daughter of Dioneus, he promised him a gift. However, when Ixion reneged on the promise, Dioneus stole some of his horses. Enraged, Ixion invited him to dinner to make amends, but instead pushed him into a fiery pit of coals. I mean, he is the son of Ares, like what you expect. He was banished for such a crime because it was completely uncool, but after a few years, wandering sad and alone, Zeus took pity on him and invited him up to Olympus. That's a good idea, where Ixion got the hots for Hera. Zeus decided to see if he would actually even try it, like would he even try it? And so he sent him a cloud shaped like Hera. Ixion did try it, and he made love with the cloud, and even stranger, it got pregnant. Their union gave birth to the first centaurs, who were literally and figuratively horny little half-horse, half-human people that roamed the world. As further punishment, Ixion was thrown from Olympus, struck by Zeus's lightning bolt, and bound by Hermes to a fiery spinning wheel. Some people just really don't deserve your pity, man. They just don't. Number 3, Raktabija. This dude seriously sounds terrifying, and I don't know how anybody beat him, but they had to create a whole god to get rid of him. Raktabija wasn't just one demon in Indian mythology, he could simultaneously be hundreds, thousands, millions. If one drop of his blood hit the ground, another Raktabija would form, and worse than that, the creature would actually get more powerful when a new version of himself was formed. It was like a huge narcissistic thing. I'm not sure how that works, especially since he's only a tiny baby part. Like, whoa, I'm so powerful. As you can imagine, he was incredibly difficult to defeat. Every time he spilled blood, it was like, whoa, there's more of you. So the gods combined all of their power and created Kali, the destroyer of demons. A grotesque looking goddess decorated with bloody limbs. You know the one, the lady with the multiple arms dancing about. Yeah, an equally fierce demon to face Raktabija. During their battle, of course, his blood poured onto the ground from his wounds, creating thousands of demons. But instead of letting the blood drop to the floor, Kali pierced him and drank all of the blood so not a single drop would hit the floor. And that was how she destroyed him. Kind of like the OG battle vampire. Number 2, Putana. It takes some guts to take on the dude who was literally born to destroy you, but Putana thought she could do it. Putana was an evil demon who was passionate about taking the lives of the young. Needless to say, not someone you want at a daycare. When baby Krishna was born, it was foretold that he would destroy all the demons. Literally his job. So Putana thought she could take the guy out early. She disguised herself as a beautiful young woman, laced her breast with poison, and entered his room. Because of her disguise, nobody thought twice, and so she sat down to feed the babe. But unfortunately for her, she made a huge mistake. Krishna was born to destroy demons, never mind the poison, and as he fed from her, he sucked her life away instead. Putana died in absolute agony, and Krishna assured everyone that he was here to do one thing and one thing only: his job. And last but not least, number 1, Mahishasura. Look, I can understand appreciating the beauty of an animal, but when bestiality is thrown into the mix, we gotta pull the reins on that. I know Zeus from Greek mythology was all about that as well. It just seems to be a thing that gods like to do across the world. It's a global thing. Remember the king of demons? Well, this was another demon king who was the son of the king of demons, but not the one previously mentioned. But anyways, his mother was a buffalo. His father had fallen in love with the beauty of a buffalo and married her. Mahisha means buffalo and Asura means demon in Hindi, therefore buffalo demon. No man on this planet could kill him, and he was a very confident dude. He started a war with the people and won. His power knew no bounds because of course what man could kill him? However, there was a catch. A man couldn't kill him, but a woman could. But what woman could kill someone so strong? So the gods created the goddess Durga, and she waged war on the tyrant, finally fulfilling the prophecy. Boy oh boy, do I love a loophole.